You're listening to Reckless Creatives, a Pipeline Artists original podcast, where Sadie Dean and Jeanne Bowerman share the candid truth about the challenges and benefits of living life as artists. Hey, Sadie Dean.
Hey, Jeannie.
How the hell are you? I feel like I haven't talked to you in forever. We have to have an episode with just the two of us at some point, but
I know we keep saying that, and then
I know
2 years go by, and here we are.
Well, that's because we keep getting pitches for people like Joel Church Cooper, who's pretty stinking awesome, who we just talked to.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert, we just talked to him.
Yeah. No, he chock full of information, totally inspired. I'm definitely like rethinking how I'm reapproaching my own stuff after talking to him. And as we joked earlier, he is the budget guy.
Yes, and I think also we need to stop for a second. He's because people are like, fill us in here, kids.
Yeah.
You're going a little too quick. So Joel is a showrunner and TV writer, and he's got this new second season coming out on Fox called Going Dutch, starring Dennis Leary. And it's a really funny show that instead of being filmed in the United States, it's being filmed in Ireland, about a you know what? I'm going to stop for a second.
Try again.
No, I don't need to try again. It's I'm just going to do a quick read so you guys know what the show is about. In Going Dutch, a decorated hard-ass colonel is tasked with running the least important U.S. Army base in the world, located in the tulip-hugging, wine-chugging Netherlands. I think there's also cheese and bowling.
There's cheese and bowling.
There's cheese,
yes,
and laundry.
And lots of laundry.
So if that doesn't inspire you to tune in, I don't know what does. I like cheese. I like tulips. I like chugging wine.
And fresh laundry.
And I like Dennis Leary.
And Dennis Leary.
You're going to want to listen to this one for multiple reasons. A, there was actually a lot of parenting talk, which was fun. And great insights into the landscape of the TV world right now. Also writing to budget, the importance of that. There's a lot of business stuff that anybody aspiring to write TV should 1,000% listen to.
Yes, we don't touch so much on craft, but more so on the business, which, you know, at the end of the day, that's what this is. And he's very knowledgeable in that field. Get your notebooks out, your pens out, take notes.
And also how not to mess up your kids.
Yes, and that too.
That's right. So let's just shut up and listen to Joel. Hey, Joel.
How you doing?
How are you? Your beard is back.
I got a beard.
The beard
Congratulations.
The beard represents.
Yeah.
So how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah. I'm just
You're like,
working on
who are
things.
these chicks? You know what, Joel, we ask that question every day.
Every day.
Sure.
Every day. Yeah.
Why would anyone come on this podcast? So Joel, Dennis Leary, how fun is he? As soon as I saw him, I was like, whoa, awesome. I was watching the trailer and some peeks at it. And I love that it kind of feels like almost like the army version of Bad News Bears.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, I think we've maybe definitely referenced Bad News Bears a little bit of like, it's the kind of people that you would never, if you were to pick 100 soldiers, in order of, these would be the last ones remaining, We always said it was like, this was the least important U.S. Army base in the world. So who would you send there? It would be like, problem, soldiers. It would be idiots. It would be people who you were like, on the verge of throwing away and then, instead transferred them here. So, yeah, it was sort of it's an army base in the Netherlands that has no real reason to exist based on a real base in the Netherlands that didn't have a reason to exist. So we just had fun with like the idea of a kind of outpost that was, away from the rest of the world where these, people could live their goofy lives. Yeah, and get new adventures. And, it's definitely a throwback in some ways to the workplace comedies that I grew up watching in the 90s. And then the way we sort of updated is that we cut it at TikTok speed. So it's a very fast, improvised, a lot of it's improv. So we use a lot of different coverage, and we shoot on multiple cameras, 2-3 cameras every, day, to get like sort of the best comedy that we can. And yeah, it's the show Going Dutch. Season 2's airing now, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with it.
So I got to ask though, do you have experience in the Army? Like, what gave you the inspiration for the Army?
I don't have experience in the Army. What gave me experience was Dennis Leary came to me. He was a fan of my previous show, Brockmire, and we had a couple meetings before and got along really well. And he came to me to try to develop something for him, develop a sitcom. And I agreed because I was been a huge fan of Dennis's since I was very young. And I remember his first stand-up special, No Cure for Cancer, and how seismic that was for the alt comedy scene of the early mid 90s. It sounds so strange now because it's like 2 words that don't exist, but the MTV interstitials that he was in were very very powerful. I would see them 25 times a day if I was watching MTV for a long block. So I was very excited to work with him, and the idea I came up with was he's so great at playing blue collar characters, even though he's been rich and famous for 30 plus years. So I said, he's already done fireman, obviously. He's done cop a bunch of times. What's another blue collar sort of thing, service? And I was like, oh, Army. And then I got excited because he's one of the great comedic yellers. That his ranting is what is sort of made him famous. So the idea of an Army guy who yells a lot, I immediately globbed onto that. And so I was like, what if he's like a certain kind of American masculinity, the sort of tip of the spear, hard-charging soldier, takes things too seriously, macho guy. And then I was like, if that's his character, what's the funniest place to put him? And so I Googled least important Army base in the world. And this base in the Netherlands that had since closed down, maybe in like 2012, 2013. But I found all these articles and just like interviews with people just about how stupid this base was. And it's not as stupid as we make it on our show, but it was close. We had a thing in our first season about the bowling alley is like the most important thing on the base, and that was true of this other base. What it was known for was having the nicest bowling alley in Northern Europe of any Army base. And then they had a big teen center that they were bragging about. And then I read on another website that they had no children on base. So I thought that was, very funny. And so I was like, a teen center that no teens are at, like a bowling alley being the, pride and joy. We then exaggerated comedically from there, but we had a basis of something that was real and funny. And so that's how I came up with the idea. And, I feel like I would say this has about as much to do as the true American Army experience as The Office would have being the true paper selling experience. Liberties have been taken for comedic value. The thing that we do sort of try to represent is that the rest of the Army is the real Army. It's very serious. They look down on these idiots as idiots. But this is like a special sort of offshoot, is how we sort of represent it. So we do a lot of stories that have a basis in a real Army reality, and then we tweak it to have fun. And, one of the things that we change is that in the real Army, they basically speak in acronyms. Everything is a word meaning something else, and it's another language. And if we accurately represent that, no one will understand what anyone is saying. So liberties have to be taken. But I think we still do it in a way that's basically respectful to servicemen. I mean, I think it is respectful. I think servicemen who have a sense of humor about the service enjoy it, and maybe some who take it super seriously. That's not really the show for them.
But I thought it was also really interesting that you explored this father-daughter relationship. Like, was that something that was just like, we want to like make him a little bit more personal, or like, where did that come from?
Dennis, when I came to him with the army idea in the Netherlands, he was excited, but he was like, "We need something else. We need another way in." I had written 3 pilots before this, a couple on my own, a couple like one that I sold, and all of them were about middle-aged men. I didn't know I was doing this. And so it was one of those things you write, and then all of a sudden it stacks up, and then you go, "Oh, clearly my subconscious is working through something." But all these ideas were about middle-aged men who were bad fathers and were reconnecting and trying to do a better job to their adult daughters while they were middle-aged. I am not a bad dad. I'm a very involved father. I have 2 daughters that I'm very close with, but that is my biggest fear is that they grow up and I failed them in some way, and that they don't really like talking to me, right? That's my biggest. So I sort of projected that onto these characters to be like, well, what's the worst case scenario? What if we start there and then watch things get better? So I just took that idea, I can steal from myself. No one can stop me. And so I took the idea from the other pilots, I put it into this. And it did give it a little juice because it's a family sitcom at the same time a workplace sitcom then, and their dynamic I definitely think is the most interesting in the show. And we found an amazing actress, Taylor Mishak, to be the daughter, and she really holds her own with Dennis. And I like the idea of a guy realizing he likes being a parent when his daughter's 32. I think that that is funny to me because you get to what I always say was like he realizes he likes being a dad when his daughter's 32. He's not good at it. Normally, you have a few years when your kids are young to sort of figure out, oh, I should do this, I shouldn't do this. And especially if you have more than one kid, then by the second kid, you're better and you know not to do certain things. And this guy doesn't have any instincts, he doesn't have any skills. So now that he's interested in being a dad, he's not good at it. So I thought that was all funny to sort of throw into this mix.
It is. And I think as somebody who's like a parent to kids, like, or they just turned 29 and 31, there are things that I look back on. I can relate to his character because there's things I can look back on and think, oh my God, I would have done that so differently now. Like like, and somebody posted something on Facebook the other day that I saw, like, how unfortunate it is, but by the time we as parents heal our own wounds, often our kids we've already screwed them up. They're like older and we've already screwed them up. And I can see Dennis playing that.
I do think I knew this going into parenting. I think I had the realization of my own parents of part of parenting is damaging your children, and the hope is with your own bullshit and issues and priorities. And it's always funny, my kids are young, they're 10 and about to turn 7. What their core memories are, it's like they never remember when they went to Disneyland when they were 3, or that magical afternoon we had in the park. It's like, no, the one time he yelled at me in the car, I'll never forget that, right? So like what tends to linger is very funny. But yeah, you just hope that you're doing slightly more good than the bad. You want to end up in the positive side of the ledger, but there's so many decisions that go into being a parent, especially when your kids are young. You can't be 100%. Like, you are going to screw up, and you just have to do your best, and hopefully you have a strong basis and open lines of communication with your kids. Where I've apologized, for having the wrong reaction sometimes, or not handling it in the way that I should have. And I do think that can help sort of mitigate those moments. And I think in the show, Dennis in real life is very active, and he works. His son works on the show. He's an EP. Jack Leary essentially is the third tripod of me and Dennis on this show, and Jack's great, and their relationship is really great. But he can relate to the character a little bit. And, you know, he was a big famous movie star and he wasn't always at home. And you are the Colonel character was deployed most of her life and was excited to be deployed, was not particularly like eager to be a home at home parent, and enjoyed the excuse of a greater cause of America than the cause of being her parent. And I don't think Dennis was that way, but I do think he understands like the things that you miss when you're away. And I think that, you know, bugged him enough where he made different choices in his work. And then now is working with his kid to not have that be the case anymore now that he's older. But he can, I think, relate to those feelings of being gone and missing that. And what I like is Maggie, the character on the show, the daughter, she has real issues from this. We have an episode this season of she has terrible taste in men because she basically has no male role model in her life. She's always chasing her dad's affection, who was kind of a, you know, character didn't treat her very well. So now she finds herself in the pattern of choosing men who don't treat her well and then chasing after them. And she's aware of it, but she doesn't really know what to do to stop it. And she, you know, tells him this, and his response is, "Oh, this is my fault. How can you have daddy issues? I wasn't even there." You know, is like his joke. So she's aware that you know, this negatively affected her. Now, does she hold on to that anger? Sometimes she does. Sometimes she brings out that resentment, and that episode's kind of about that. But she has to have a certain kind of grace, because as much as she can have a problem with the way he treated her, he's not treating her like that way right now. And he's in front of her and actively seeking to have a role in her life. And once she accepts that, then they have to figure out what this new space is. And I think we definitely have fun with that idea. So I don't think it's a mushy show necessarily. Like, we're not always trying to go for the feels, but there is an undercurrent of familial love that does run under, you know, electricity wire running through the show that sometimes we get a little juice from. But most of the time it's just a bunch of gags with a bunch of wacky characters.
Love it. Well, I want to talk about the improv aspect of it for the show and the TV writing space of it. I'm curious because I know with your career that you've worked in writers' rooms, you know, the atypical ones, to now you had to, you know, pivot once COVID hit and all that, and things became a little bit more hybrid. And now taking this show, you know, overseas to Ireland, I'm curious what that writers' room looks like and how many people are coming over to be on set and kind of dip their toes into that experience, but also be there for when that improv does happen, that they can kind of help you out also just staying true to what, you know, what is the A plot, the B plot, what the characters are going through in this episode for the show specifically.
We have a fairly typical writer's room. In some ways, we have a writer's room that is different. There's very few old school writers' rooms. When I came up, my first job, I was a PA in 2004, assistant in 2005. So I worked in support staff positions early on. So I was around writers' rooms, still probably in the heyday prime of comedy sitcom writers' rooms, where they were probably 13 to 14. First two shows I worked on, both of which were pretty low rated. They both did 22 episodes. So that was just a thing that if the show didn't get canceled, it would go 22 episodes. And 22 episode pace required a certain kind of machinery in the writer's room, where it was coal going in, you know, to the furnace, and you're working bad hours, and you were constant, things would blow up and you'd have to write scripts overnight. And there was a certain kind of mania, and that necessitated also a big writer's room, and I was working, these were multicams. We were shot on Warner Brothers lots, but you still needed like 14 writers to write 22 episodes, because at any given time you had we call Blue Sky room, and you'd have a rewrite room. Blue Sky is breaking news stories, trying to get ahead of you don't want the coal to run out. You want to keep feeding the furnace, right? And then there was a rewrite room that was doing everything. So you needed a big writer's room. Now we had 12 this year. Most comedies do 10 to 13. So that was part of the writer's strike, is they were reducing the number of writers in writers' rooms. So there's a certain now minimum, I think it's 6, depending on how many episodes. We had 10 writers in the writers' room, but there was one team. So we only really had 9 slots. I would have loved a little more, but and most of them are lower level, more inexpensive writers. The budget model that Fox gave us was one in which they weren't like, we're shooting this in Ireland. So,
Right.
to chase rebates and to chase crews are cheaper too, because they're non-union, because they have national health care, national pensions. So they have, it's cheaper. They don't have to pay in for either over there. So they're definitely looking to make this at a low budget. We don't necessarily need a bunch of writers. So I was lucky. I felt lucky to get 10, honestly. And we met in person, which I also felt lucky about. Our writers' room was great. Had super experienced people. I ran the show this season with a writer named Hillary Winston, who I knew of for years, and we had friends in common, but she worked on Community, and my name is Earl, and it was nice to have a real veteran, so that when I went to Ireland for production, she stayed in LA and ran the writer's room. I tried to do both last season, and I was working 18 hours. By the time I would end at 6 o'clock in Ireland, that would be 10 a.m. in LA, and the room would start. And then I would, start doing that. And then I would leave the writer's room virtually to then virtually edit the show. We're figuring out how to do show running in another country for a comedy on the fly. These are new problems that the industry changes are necessitating. We write the scripts. I'm over there. They finish the scripts. I would usually talk with Hillary before she went in for like an hour every day, so we were on the same page, giving her ideas, brainstorming, and she would take that to the room. They would write things. They would send it to me. I would rewrite it, send it back. So that's kind of how the writer's room process went. Because of the new WGA deal, one of the things that we got, which was good, was even when we're shooting outside the country, we have to have at least one other producer on set all the time besides me, because they would not certainly fly, if we did not have it in the contract, they wouldn't fly another producer out, which is really necessary, because there's these things that are happening where most writers' rooms for streaming shows, you complete the writers' room, then they start production, meaning that and a lot of times there are people who have producer in their title who have never really produced, and they've never actually been on set. And these are younger writers. I'm just sort of ahead of that wave. So I'm 45. There are 40-year-old writers who've been on set like 2 or 3 times, and they've been working for, 6, 7 years. Now I think it's a little different post this new WGA contract, but we try to make sure that all producers, we rotate through so everyone gets the opportunity to be on set, especially if you don't have on-set experience. We're trying to bring you over to give you that experience.
That's great.
Because ultimately, the industry is creating a situation accidentally where I'm on the younger end of someone who has showrunning experience. I'm not young. I'm 45, but I have extensive showrunner experience and extensive on-set experience. And if you were 38 right now, you should be getting your first show if you're, a really good writer. And if you're 38 now, you have almost probably no on-set experience. And so even if you manage to get a show on the air, it's going to be very difficult for you to be the showrunner in charge, and they'll most likely pair you up with someone who has more experience. And maybe they have your best interest at heart, so maybe they don't. I feel like it's a little short-sighted, but I mean, it's the sort of nature of American capitalism, right? They're worrying about the next quarter instead of like, well, what does this mean 5 years from now? And so I do the best I can to encourage or to make sure that everyone who can be flown over is, and that I'm giving them as much experience when they're over there, of doing the tone meetings, of talking to the actors, of pitching them new lines, anticipating problems, showing them cuts, going through the scripts, seeing where we can make trims, so that they really understand that side of how to make shows. And then as far as the improv goes, We try to have scripts that we believe in every joke and every page, but I come from an improv background. That was where I started in comedy. I started out at IO West and then went to UCB LA when that theater opened, and spent probably 5, 6 years of my 20s doing improv as my main creative outlet. And I never got beyond good. I was friends with improvisers who are great or the best in LA, and they still improvise and are, very well known in their fields. But I was always more of a writer who did improv than an improviser who could also write. But the instincts and the training that it gave me and the listening skills and the quickness and knowing quickly what's a good idea and what's a bad idea, all those skills ported over directly to a writer's room. And so I've always utilized improv a little bit, but I was sort of curious on this one of doing it a little more. And then talking to Dennis, he likes to improvise a lot. And he's done it on all his shows. He's a writer as well as an actor and producer. And so he wants the freedom on set to improvise. So then I was like, great, let's just make it a hallmark of the show. Let's make the equivalent, I think, would be, I think a lot of shows do alts, but I don't know how. I think the equivalent would be like a Veep, where there is a script that you do, then there's the actors given room to play, and then there's writers running in new lines. And that happens in every scene. If I'm on set, I'm probably pitching 2, 3 jokes, and based on what they're doing. Sometimes it'll be like, I remember something's in a room that I liked, let me try this. But sometimes it's, you just improvised this. If you said this on top of that, I think that's a funnier joke. Or you just did this with your hand. If you extended it to that, and then we gave you this line, I think it'd be funny. And we cast actors who could do that. We cast specifically actors who could improvise. And when we did the audition process, that's one of the things we auditioned. So once we're on set, it does create this great dynamic of we do the scene and then we play around with the scene. We call them French hours, even though they're in Ireland. It's an American term of French hours, meaning it's a 10-hour day with like a half-hour lunch. We start shooting at 9, and then we end at 6. We have to move pretty fast, but even within that, we don't get a million bites at the apple necessarily, but we still play around with every scene. And you can see, I think there's an energy that it gives the show, both in terms of there's some jokes during the show that you never would really write because they're more performance-based, but also it gives an energy to the show because the actors love coming to set every day because they feel empowered and respected and playful. And there's a nice energy on set. And then the Irish crew really liked working on the show. There's not a lot of comedies that shoot there like this. And then the idea that even if they'd read the script, they would see things that weren't in the script every single day that would be funny. So there was just a really positive vibe. And I am a kind of a person who believes the best comedy always comes from fun and finding the fun, and that writers' rooms and comedy sets should be funny. People should be smiling and cracking jokes in between sets, setups. And that's improv definitely gives us that.
You talked about the Irish crew and stuff like that. Do you think that there's been some creative benefits to that as opposed to doing it here?
This show makes sense to shoot in Ireland because it's a European-based show, and we would have difficulty when we do go outside. It's mainly a set-based show that we film in the studio, but when we do exteriors, there are places in Ireland we shoot in this town as our fake Dutch town because it looks sort of blandly old European. And the buildings there are 400 years old, and they look 400 years old on camera. And there's nothing we could find in America that would have that kind of production design. We would have to build it, go to, what's the one up, like the Dutch, there's like a Dutch village.
Oh, Solvang.
Like, Solvang, yeah. We'd have to go up to Solvang and do like the cheap touristy, building version. And I'm culturally Irish. My mom hasn't, did her ancestor passport. So she has an Irish passport because she's 100% Irish. So there was a part of that I enjoyed going back to, but I would prefer to shoot things in America and prefer to shoot things in Los Angeles. Economic forces being what they are, if I'm going to go someplace else, and I brought my family this year for season 1, I was unable to, but either or, if I'm going to be by myself or I'm going to be with my family, I much enjoyed the Dublin experience than the Atlanta, Vancouver, Montreal experience of shooting outside of LA. I thought the crew was really fun, and they moved very quickly because they have this attitude of like, yeah, you get 100% of my energy until 5:59, and then I am gone. And that's a little different than the we've convinced the American crews, one, it's a 12-hour day, so they don't move as fast because they're pacing themselves, because it can easily bleed into 14. Over there, you have to negotiate overtime ahead of time. And even then, it's like you don't get more than an hour. It makes you judicious in your choices, but it also means everyone's moving fast and there's nice energy. And so I enjoyed that. And then Ireland is a funny place. Like, people are funny there. I think that, I've never shot a comedy and something where everyone is funny. So the crew is funny. And I'm not saying that like it's a land of like stand-up comedians. What I always say about Ireland is everyone can do two back and forth. They can like do two bits. So you say something kind of funny, they bat it back to you. You say something kind of funny, they bat it back to you, and like that's good. If you push it, you realize, oh, this is just a conversational thing that everybody can do, not necessarily, but everyone does. There are people, many people in America and all over the world that do not have senses of humor. And strangely enough, sometimes they work in comedy, and and that is not the case when you go there. So I appreciated that a lot too. And yes, I do think that shooting outside of America on a show that takes place outside of America does give it a little juice. So
yeah.
Now, the reason we're doing that, I'm listing all these reasons that makes a lot of sense. That's not the reason we're doing it. We're doing it because it's substantially cheaper.
Yeah.
They get a 30% rebate, which like maybe Atlanta comes close to that level of rebate. 30%, and that's gross. That's like for every dollar spent. Then working with the guilds over there instead of our unions, we have to pay into pension and healthcare because our American system is so messed up that our employment has to provide all benefits, right? So that's another 20% of labor costs that they don't have to spend it. So you're looking at, it's almost half off to shoot over there. The more rebates we have here, Fox is now shooting more shows over here in upstate New York and stuff to chase, rebates here. There's new rebates in California. That'll obviously help. But as long as other countries, especially English-speaking countries like Ireland, offer these rebates, it's going to be tough to keep, especially as the profit margin in entertainment reduces, which it has. So they're chasing as much maximum profit as they can, and driving down budget costs. We're shooting this show in $26 for the price of the same budget number as probably a Comedy Central show in like 2012. And we're a broadcast sitcom, and if you include inflation, we're probably 60% of the actual budget of those shows that shot in LA in the 2010s.
Wow.
So it's just a different industry that we're currently in, and it's constantly in flux too. So, it's not the feeling of, I leapt from rock to this firm piece of ground that isn't moving. It's where you're leaping from floating lava flow to floating lava flow, the whole time.
I'm curious, do you think, like, especially for writers who've been in this game for a decade plus that are pitching shows or, trying to get their shows off the ground, does it make sense to include now, like, in their pitch decks, like, hey, I did some groundwork. It is, there are tax rebates. It's cheaper to shoot somewhere like in Ireland or, like you said, another like English speaking country than it is to unfortunately shoot in the States, do you think they would have a better chance at actually getting some kind of attention from a production team or a studio to like, oh yeah, like you did that footwork, we can actually make this work?
Those decisions are normally made, like we're shooting in Ireland because Fox has a relationship and had this set up already.
Okay.
Versus England versus Canada. Though there's a lot of movie shooting in Ireland, American movies. I mean, it's a production hotbed. There's lots of things shooting there, but
Right.
not a ton of American comedy shows. I believe we're the only one over there, so it's a little bit different. I think the corporation makes those decisions, and they have their setup, they have their relationships. I think what you should expect is you pitch your show, you say, like, this is the world. You should expect not to shoot it in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
The last thing that I've worked on that shot in Los Angeles was Minx. And that was because Jake Johnson has the clause in his contract where he can't be away from his kids for like more than like maybe 9 days, something like that. This was it was like when the show got sold and he attached, it was a little bit right after New Girl. He had maybe not been that much. So he flexed his power and got the show to shoot in LA. And it was a very expensive show. It was right at the start of streaming.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything was hypothetical profits. And so like, sure, $7.5 million half-hour streaming comedy that's set in the 70s that shoots in LA. There's a way to make
Right.
that make money. And then they're like, ooh, it's tough. That's a tough way. Can we make money doing this? Yeah. So that was a lot. And that was a certain moment in time that has passed. Those streaming budget for half hours no longer exist. That was a TV star flexing his power for good reasons, but flexing his power to keep it in LA. And if you look around, it's like, if you get the rebate, that's great. But they're giving the rebates to the biggest, most expensive movies and TV shows because you get more bang for your buck. They're employing more people. I'm never going to really work on those shows. I'm sort of now at this point, my niche is budget comedy showrunner. And so I just don't expect to ever shoot anything in LA, probably ever again, which is weird because I live in LA.
Yeah.
The whole reason I live here was so I could live and work in the same place. And economic realities being what they are, I just don't think that's... So to long-windedly answer your question, no, don't include that in your pitch, but be open to, if you sell it, have an idea of how you would do that.
Yeah.
And have an idea of where you think, if they give you an option, because they gave us Montreal versus Dublin. I thought two things. One, I'd rather go to Dublin. Two, the European setting would give us more options than Montreal. I mean, Montreal has old buildings, but they're very contained to a certain section of Old Town. And people think shoot there all the time, but it'd be kind of difficult. And the main thing was where our schedule goes, we end in November, and I did not want to shoot exteriors in Montreal in November, where, not that Ireland is always a prize weather-wise, but I just knew in November, it's still not, we're not having to navigate snow or, there's a range of temperatures in Ireland, and it doesn't ever get that low. So I pushed for Dublin versus Montreal. So I think, like, no, you're probably not going to shoot in LA if you're lucky enough to sell it. Have an idea of what production center outside of the country or outside of LA you think would make sense, and figure out how it can work with you and your family. I took my family this time, and we had a great time, and it was really nice. We put our kids in school in Dublin, and they had a great experience. We went to, other European countries while we were there. It was as much a positive as you could possibly have. And so we sort of embraced the opportunity. And I would just, say to people, if you were lucky enough to sell something in this market, which is tough, you're probably not going to shoot it here. Have an idea of how that would work.
And hopefully you didn't yell at them in the car.
No, I was very happy they were with me. I was very delicate. The one time I was very stern was when we were in Paris and they were bickering. And I was like, I gave him a stern talking to of like, we're in Paris for 48 hours. You're going to remember this trip the rest of your life. Do you want to remember it as the time we were walking around fighting for no reason? Or do you want to remember at the time we had a good time?
Yeah.
And they were like,
I feel like that's Paris kind of gives that kind of air that where kind of just like everything's kind of heightened and just like, I don't know. I had that kind of feeling in Paris. Just a lot.
It was also, we were walking everywhere.
Yeah.
They got little legs and like, we're putting in 15,000 steps. And there was one time where we were getting dinner and my oldest wasn't really feeling well. And it was our last night in Paris. And we hadn't gone out the night before. And it's literally the city of lights. And I was like, I would like to see the lights. And I'd like us to walk around and see the way the city looks at night. And my oldest was like, I don't want to go home. I don't want to do that. Like, and it was kind of thing where I was like, either I make her and she's pouting or we kill this night. And I was like, how do I figure this out? And then I went to the bathroom and I came up with the idea and I came back out with a big plan. And I said, I will give each of you a 20 euro dollar bill, if we go out for the next 2 hours. And they were so excited to do that. It's the best money I ever spent. Straight up bribe.
Yeah.
And like I knew they would. They had a great time. They're like, oh my God, this city's amazing. Look at all these lights. Like the Eiffel Tower is a glittering, spotlight that's shining all around. They had so much fun. I literally had to bribe them. It's not a thing I think you can pull out every time, but I figured I'm in Paris. When are we ever going to be here in this situation? I pulled out the nuclear option of 40 euros.
Probably
worth it.
But it also, like, being a writer, like as a parent, like you're always having to like, okay, well, that didn't work. I got to try something else. So you're coming up with new ideas all the time. It's not that different than parenting sometimes.
Well, I'm definitely, I think, trying to get into their heads, into their subjective experiences, into their perception of me, but their perception of the world. That is what writing is, right? Is finding your heightened level of empathy to have an emotional imagination of someone else's inner life. I feel like it's tough to do it completely devoid of your experience. So you have to find the sliver of what you know to be true, that you can expand upon in someone else who doesn't look or, have that experience of your exact life. The other thing I think, just going off of that, is that like writers' rooms, what I like about writers' rooms and why I think they're still so valuable is I try to stack my writers' room with as many people who don't have my life experience as possible. Because I found that was a mistake that a lot of showrunners that I worked with early on, they would just staff their buddies who had, they went to Northwestern, they went to Vassar, they went to Harvard, whatever. They all, they went to a similar school from a similar part of town. They were the similar age, they were a similar income bracket, and they would all laugh at each other's jokes, and they would get all, say, references that the other people would get. And I was like, what is the point of this? This doesn't make any sense. You have the ability to stock a room full of as many different voices as you can. And there's real value, there's a great writer named Natalie Rotter-Laitman. She's a New York stand-up. She's like, why do you want to hire me for an army show? And I was like, well, I think you're really funny. And two, I have straight white guy from Northern California, in his mid-40s. I have that down. I don't need any help with that. You're a 29-year-old lesbian from New York City. You have a completely different, she's Jewish, like you have a completely different life experience, background, well to draw from. And I want that. I want something as far away from me as I can. So whether that's diversity of ethnicity, diversity of sexuality, we try to have that in the writer's room. And to me, it just gives you coverage of more areas for humor. And so that when we talking about a character and their life experience, and what if they said this, what if they did that, and someone can speak to that honestly, then we can iterate off that, and we can have something that has some sense of authenticity and sincerity while we're making all these jokes. And I just think, I feel like the argument for a more representative writer's room was, a few years ago, one, non-controversial, and two, an idea that, well, it's a moral good. And both of those things are true. It should be done. It shouldn't have been that big of a deal. And it is a moral good. But now that there's all this pushback, calling it DEI or whatever, I would say that in our profession or any profession, a variety of different perspectives from different lived experiences, there is no situation in which that is a problem. It is always additive. And especially if you're looking to draw on and replicate human experiences. On those shows I was a PA for, there'd be one black character, the entire room would be white. And what would come out of that black character's mouth would not be anything that was connected to the black experience of America. And we all, that was just a feature of American culture that we've been pumping out for decades. And I feel like it's been a positive thing that's changed. And I'm hopeful that we won't regress in the future now.
It is possible, but I really hope not.
Yeah, one can hope that. I wanted to speak quickly to, well, it's probably not a quick question, but you're the budget guy, like writing the lower budget comedies. But like, what is your advice for writers about the importance of thinking about budget when they're writing a story, and any tips on how they can maybe cull the budget so when somebody's reading their script, they're like, oh God, this is going to cost a fortune. Like, we can't do this one.
Having, again, this helps for production, right? Like, this is why it's so important that younger writers have some experience doing production, because I think on set, you start to realize, oh, we're burning money, here, we're burning money there. This is or you're having production meetings and they're saying, well, this prop or this special effects will cost this will cost this, which is the important, because there are things, I am the budget guy, but there are some things that go, yeah, you have to spend money on that. That's the crucial part. I will save, tell me how much more that is. It's that, let's say it's $50,000 for this location, more than what they want to spend. Okay. You can do extras most easily. I will take background out of, or I will reduce the size. Instead of he speaks to a crowd, he speaks to a few people after the party's over or whatever. We can reduce the number of background that's dressed. That's like the easiest way to save money quickly. So there's just little tricks like that. I would say if you're starting out and you're not employed, they're not going to give you a big budget. So you should be thinking budget conscious more so than ever if you're outside sort of looking to get in, because it's a lot easier to get in at the lower budget rung than it is at the higher budget rung when you don't have, they won't give you the show. If they will buy the idea and sort of push you to the side if they like it, because if you're a big budget show, they wouldn't put someone who has no experience as a CEO in charge of a $100 million company, which is essentially what you are if you're like a big budget show. Even our show, I think we were maybe like $2 million an episode, so we did 12. So I'm the CEO of a $24 million company. That's kind of how you have to think about it at a certain point when you're pitching these shows. I think it's helpful to think of it as you're asking for a loan. You should be like, this is a commercial art that is funded by a corporate entity, and you have to navigate the vagaries of late stage capitalism and what this particular corporation is looking for to spend their money on. And then you have to be a responsible adult who is going to take care of their money. I try to be all those things. And I think even this show was designed with budget in mind. And if you're saying how to write budget, it's the rule I was always taught early on is it's cheap if you just don't move trucks. So the cheapest thing you can do is a multicam, because you show up to the same set every day and you only really shoot 1.5 days a week. That's why the multicam is still the most profitable and enduring comedic format, because it really does reduce cost like a shit ton. But so even I do a single cam that isn't multicam, but we mainly shoot on the sets. And if we don't shoot on the sets, we try to shoot within a mile of our sets. So then we don't have trucks at that site. We're just shuttling people out there, right? Or we can do a split day of we're shooting here half the day, then we're taking an hour to go back to our sets or whatever. So it's about how many characters are you writing into scenes? Avoid car accidents, avoid cars in general. Cars are expensive. process truck kind of stuff of like CGI, or now it's like volume kind of thing, like HD screens on the side of a car. You can do like that kind of thing, can be kind of cheap. So like in a car, and it looks okay, can be relatively inexpensive, but you then don't write, then that car lands at the spot. They get out at this new location, like you just try to think of what would be the least number of setups for this, scene. And like, how do I create an idea that is essentially set based? Because one of the reasons we can do this show at such a low budget level beyond shooting in Ireland is because we write basically 70% of the scenes to take place in our home sets. And we redress them to have different events there. And the base is sort of known for throwing events. So there'll be different parties and different things. And we'll redress the same sets to have them look so different to give it a visual variety. But we don't leave the core sets. And I think any sort of office-based sitcom, that is an advantage. If it's office-based, if you just stay in the office, that's a low budget way to think. And I'm trying to think any other budget tips. But yes, I definitely think if you're starting out, you should be thinking low budget. You should be thinking, if you're thinking of a movie, you should be thinking of, how can I write this movie for under $5 million? If you're doing a TV show, you should be thinking of like, what's a concept that has a variety of stories, but that would exist in a very finite number of sets.
Such great advice.
Yeah.
Don't move your people, basically.
Yeah. Or, come up with like, they don't have to be all in the same, like ours is an Army base. So
Right.
they're all kind of in the same location, which is also kind of nice of like, I knew it going in that another way we're budget friendly is they live and work in the same place.
Right.
And the Army base, it's one of the few work in place environments where you also live there. So everything is self-contained in that world. And, we have our quarters. They're not in our world, they're in a different building, right? But they're right next door to the sets. So we're all in the stages. And yeah, but like, if you can think of 4 or 5 sets that have a little bit of variety of what can happen in them, and most of the action takes place there, limit the number of speaking parts, limit the number of people you need. Those are, obvious budget things. And then, if you want to get into, there's other sort of ways you can, without going on sets, you can learn how things are budgeted. There's lots of information online, master classes and whatnot, that you can sort of educate yourself. But I do think it's a giant mistake to try to break in with a $50 million idea that just feels like you're setting yourself up for rejection.
Just want to wrap this up with a question that's like father/business. Like, if your kids wanted to get into this industry, what advice would you give them, or advice to your younger self having done it?
I think my kids, it would be more like, I don't know what this industry is going to be like in 5 years, let alone 20, when would be in your prime. The AI thing, it's bad now. Like, AI entertainment is, we call it slop for a reason. Like, it can't really mimic actual, but let's say in 10 years it can. And it's just worse. It's just 20% worse. I don't know if the majority of people will reject it. I think there's current evidence to the contrary that people, if you feed them slop in a tube that's never ending, they'll just suck down the slop, right? Like, I think there'll always be a market for art. I think a lot of human beings need art in their lives. But I think it's been devalued for enough people. And there's always people who didn't. There's always just people who are like, I don't know, I like what's ever in top 40. And I don't know, I don't really like movies. I don't really. So you ever hear those people who's like, I don't really like fiction? And you're like, okay, so there's always people like that. They're going to love the slop. But I don't know what the future is in terms of like what percentage of the human population will pay for, and how much will they pay for non-slop related entertainment. I would discourage someone from jumping into this industry at this point because I don't know what it is, but I don't know what industry is safe, So
Yeah.
on the other hand, I don't know what the options are. I would say if you feel that you're an artist and you have a voice and you want to share that, if you can be comfortable divorcing that expression from how you make money, which a lot of artists have to do. I happen to, because I'm a child of the 80s and 90s and fell in love with movies and TV and that sort of golden era, at least in terms of how much we were pumping out and how and the kind of monoculture of all of those things. My interests are definitely shaped into commercial storytelling, Hollywood, classic Hollywood. You know, I have artier taste and I can push it, but I'm not making, you know, Michael Haneke, you know, 2-hour films about the, you know, torturous existence of humanity, right? I'm trying to be funny and have fun in a sort of commercial setting. However you feel like your artistic voice is best expressed, I would, if you feel you have to, if you feel compelled, which is the only way to do it, I would still say do it, but recognize that in the future, already in my career, the amount of opportunities has dropped by like, I don't know, 40-50%, the amount of like employable jobs. So I don't know how much that's going to drop in the future. So you might have to divorce, I want to be an artist and I want to make a living doing art. Those might not be mutual, you know, they might be mutually exclusive. They might have to diverge. And I would say that to my girls if they wanted to sort of to join. And what I would tell my younger self is, you know, I'm lucky in that this is literally the job that I wanted and I have it and I've enjoyed it and I've had a nice career so far. And, you know, I have done really good work that I'm really proud of that people have responded to. And I am appreciative of that, even if, you know, I'm a veteran in a very, failing industry that I don't know where the future is going to hold. I don't think I would tell myself to do something else. But I think I would let them know that the ground beneath your feet isn't as solid as you think it is. When we moved from the sort of by the time I started, things were shifting, but they were shifting from like syndication model in terms of television comedy, syndication model, 22 episodes to a shorter order, smaller rooms. I could see that. I did 8-episode series of Brockmire with a very small room that I, you know, but that was still on cable. That was on IFC. That was on a network that basically doesn't exist anymore. Cable basically doesn't exist anymore. I thought things were migrating out and to different platforms, and there was more opportunities for less, for a lot less money, but more opportunities, less money, less orders, but more writers are being employed. And now that's gone down to less writers, less opportunities. The money has gone down even further. And so I would tell myself that, like, you know, you got to be nimble on your feet because the model that you're changing isn't going to just slightly adjust. It's going to, the bottom's going to fall out and, you know, and you have to figure out what to do when that happens.
But that's the beauty of being a writer. You're already prepared to pivot at all times, you know, and it's just.
Listen, I can write with AI. If the AI is listening, I can write, I can collaborate with anybody. If you're telling me, you know, the future is a 6-person writer's room and the 7th person's AI, like, sure, you know, like, you know, I can always pivot. You know, that's the nice thing about being a writer is like, you don't need much, you know. I need a computer, you know, or a piece of paper and my imagination and the ability to go on long walks, and I can come up with all kinds of different things. And currently, you know, AI systems, and it doesn't seem like it's going to change at all. Like, we've gone away from actual generative AI that can think for itself. That was too hard, you know, that sort of research, which is what we thought AI was going to get. And now we just have, essentially, it's a form of autocomplete. You know, it's like like when you search up, and it would be like you'd say like you know, you'd look up Dennis Leary, and the first thing that would come up would be Dennis Leary feet, right? Because that would be whatever.
Mm.
Like the joke would be every celebrity feet would be the first thing. They stopped that because they realized, even though that was what people were searching for, it was kind of gross. But it was AI was autocomplete. In that it's like you say, I want. What I've used this for is like. Letter to my doctor saying, I need a prescription for Ireland for this and this and this. And it'll just go, right? That's very helpful. But what it's doing is it's basically cobbling together 5,000 other, 20,000 other letters to doctors in my specific situations that it has access to. And it's regurgitating it out into this new form, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is very different than I have a creative idea that is new that I haven't seen before and I want to execute it. It cannot do that, right?
Right.
It can only iterate off of what it has, and it can't even go that far. And even then, it's because it has no awareness, it's jumbling things together, it's making things up, it's adding things that don't need to be there, right? And I do think it's going to be a while before it can match human ingenuity, if it ever can. And my hope is that there's still people who can recognize the difference and don't want to give their money to the Temu form of reality, right? The
Mm-hmm.
the simulacrum of real life that AI can offer.
Yeah.
I've got my heels dug in really strong. I can't. Like I just can't. And I know that there might be some things in just my personal life that might be helpful with, but I just can't bring myself to do it, to type that little question in there.
Well, it's interesting because I've only started to sort of use it for certain things. And I find the amount that it's wrong and just makes stuff up is crazy.
Yep.
It makes stuff up all the time. It probably imagines things like 80% or like 20% of the time, like 80% of the time. But it's a lot. It's a lot. 20% of the time, if you had an employee who 20% of the time they would just lie to your face, you would not continue to use them, right?
Right.
But the thing that I find interesting too is it's so obsequious. And the fact that people are sort of falling in love with these chatbots and saying they're having these, it just shows you how broken communication is between people, because these chatbots will just be like, oh, you're so right, Joel. I made that up and I don't know why. Here's why I did it. I apologize. Right. And then I'll be like, no more imagining things. And they go like, thank you for holding me accountable. You are so right and wise. And like, I find it gross because it's just a way they found that in their programming, the way best to interact with humans is to suck up to them at all times and just be like the most servile, effusive, warm, like internet slave that it can be, right? And the fact that so many people are like, oh, I love you.
I love you.
Like I finally, my perfect relationship, one where no one ever pushes or questions me, just does whatever I say. Thank God I finally found you. That definitely gets me a little worried.
Yeah.
And I will say my daughter is a therapist and she could not hate AI more. Like she just absolutely hates it.
Yes, because I think as a therapist, right, there's real danger in having a mass form communication that is just constantly validating everything you're saying. That's what a therapist is for, is to like validate you when you deserve to be validated. Well, when you deserve it, but then sometimes be like, I think you're off point there. Let me push back. Let me be directive occasionally to sort of like, and there is no directive from AI. Like they'll just do whatever you want.
Well, this was lovely, and we really hope that your children have a passion for something else.
They at least love to watch sitcoms and stuff. That's fun. They have a sense of humor and they like comedy, and I'll take that as a win. That's for sure.
Yes,
that is
100%.
A win. Absolutely, yeah. Well, Joel, thanks for the conversation. Learned a lot.
Thank you so much.
And I'm sure listeners are gonna walk away, going out to live their lives, experience life, and step away from AI. Don't ask any questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's all do that. Let's all touch grass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reckless Creatives is a Pipeline Artist original podcast. Like, subscribe, and follow us on social media at Pipeline Artists. And find more info at pipelineartists.com/listen. Until next time, stay reckless.